Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Testing Psychologist podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Sharp, licensed psychologist, group practice owner, and private practice coach. Many of y'all know that I have been using therapy notes as our practice EHR for over 10 years now. I've looked at others, and I just keep coming back to therapy notes because they do it all. If you're interested in an EHR for your practice, you can get 2 free months of therapy notes by going to thetestingpsychologist.com/therapy notes and enter the code TESTING. This episode is brought to you by PAR. PAR offers the Spectra Indices of Psychopathology, a hierarchical dimensional look at adult psychopathology. The Spectra is available for paper and pencil assessment or administration and scoring via PAR iConnect. Learn more at parinc.com/spectra. That's SPECTRA. Hey, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm glad to be here, as always, with you. And today's guest is a professional, a colleague, a friend, someone I've spent in-person time with, which makes it all the more special. I've got Julie Harris from Green Oak Accounting here to talk about profit first and beyond is the way I think of it. So I think many of you have probably heard of Profit First as a financial management or accounting system for your practice. So we talk about Profit First, but then we also go beyond the basics and talk about what happens if you've maybe mastered Profit First or just mastered the finances in your practice and you have good money problems and you need to figure out what to do about that. So we do a beginning section where we talk about kind of basics of Profit First and financial management and things like that. And then we flip the script and talk about more advanced strategies, things to think about when things are going well. We talk about expanding into a group practice. We talk about mistakes that people make when hiring. We talk about the expected profit margin for different stages of practice. We talk about what to pay people and compensation. So there are a lot of great points and pieces of information to take away from this podcast as usual. But Julie really brought it today, and I think you'll really enjoy this one. So if you're a practice owner, you know the drill here. If you'd like support in your practice, feel free to reach out. At this point, my mastermind groups are closed, but I am offering strategy sessions, which are one-off hours to drill deep into a particular question or two and give you some support to get you on your way. So you can go to thetestingpsychologist.com/consulting and book one of those strategy sessions if you would like. But in the meantime, check out this info with Julie Harris from Green Oak Accounting. Julie, hey, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. I feel like I've been thinking about having you on the podcast for a really long time and have seen and heard and hung out with you and read your book and all these things. And people talk about Profit First all the time. But yeah, this has been a long time coming. Thanks for being here.
I'm really glad we could make this work.
Yeah, likewise. Well, I'll start with the question that I always start with, which is, of all the things that you could be doing with your life, why focus on this?
Yeah. Well, I'm an accountant, right? First and foremost. I like to joke with my team that my superpower is numbers and specifically seeing the story within the numbers, right? So when I look at a profit and loss or a balance sheet or any kind of financial report, I vividly see what is happening in a business. And I think that is a superpower in a lot of ways. And so helping business owners with their businesses, make sure they have a profitable business, increase their profit, right? I see that as a service to the business owner, their communities, their teams, their clients, service to everyone around them. And yeah, that's my jam. I grew up in a house with a mom who is a serial entrepreneur who did not understand the financial side of running a business. And so I'm probably very cautious because of that. But the numbers can really help you in whatever you're doing in business.
Yeah. I love how you frame that and saying that you like see a picture in the numbers or see a story in the numbers. I don't think that A lot of people have that superpower, but it's very descriptive. I like it.
That's how I see it in my brain, at least, right? Some people like hear colors or something like that. We're like, this is my thing.
Yeah. It's like a special version of synesthesia, right? Yeah. We've already piqued my audience's interest in thinking about what's going on in your mind. But yeah, so tell me just a little bit about the focus with mental health folks, and Green Oak, is your firm, of course. But how did you come to dial in on mental health folks specifically?
Yeah. Well, initially when I started my firm, I was a generalist, but I realized really quickly it's just challenging to work with all different kinds of businesses, right? A mental health practice versus a restaurant versus a car dealership. Like they're all very, very different in the challenges that they face, like all the little pieces. And so I knew really early on that I wanted to focus on one specific area. And that at that point that I was really kind of making that big decision, I had several therapist clients, and they were all just so lovely. I just really, really enjoyed them. And they had all come to me through referral, right? So I started with one, and then it turned into 5 and probably 10. So here are the characteristics that I just really loved. They were all obviously highly educated, very, very smart people. But really with a lot of insecurities when it came to money, managing the financial side of the business. But they were also very receptive to the information. They wanted to learn. They were keen to understand what was going on under the hood of their practice. And they were also willing to do the work of changing things and adjusting and actually listening, to the advice. And I will say, I can't think of a single client that implemented like everything we ever said, but they were generally willing to do the things. And that created a lot of positive impact. And I just find that very, very fulfilling. I tend to really like that educational relationship where we're kind of working together. Like we're going to do the work for you, but I want you to also understand what is happening and why we're doing what we're doing. And the mental health community was just really receptive to that. And so that just became our main area of focus. And then the farther down that path we went, the more we realized like we can really make a big impact because we know how to run a private practice so well at this point, right? Again, on the financial side, but still that's a big, big piece, right? Cash flow and taxes and how to hire people. Like those are really big, important parts of running a practice. And so, yeah, that's why we ended up sticking with that. And, to this day, that's all we serve. We only work with private practices and their kind of related adjacent businesses, right? Like there's a lot of real estate transactions that happen with that, or maybe coaching businesses that are just adjacent. But we don't take on any clients that are not therapists.
Right. It's like a parallel with our own clients. For those of us that do therapy, you want to work with folks who are receptive to what you are putting out there and open to change and self-reflective. All those things.
Yes. I imagine that is what you would want. That's definitely also what I want as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Good general qualities. Yeah. Do you find, I don't know, I feel in talking to a lot of businessy folks kind of outside our field, that it seems like healthcare people, whether it's physicians or dentists or therapists or psychologists or whatever, have less, less of a mind for the practice management side, the financial side, than say a restaurant person or a car dealership person. But I don't know. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I guess I would personally disagree. Okay. I think, and that's just from my lived experience, right? Not any specific data other than that. But I think in any industry, there can be folks who are really financially minded, and there's plenty of doctors that are doctors, dentists, restaurant owners that are. There's also in every industry plenty of people who are not. So I think therapists specifically tend to give themselves the label of like, oh, I'm not good with numbers, I'm bad with math. And usually it's just because you haven't really tried yet, right? And you are very capable of understanding. And it's just, sometimes maybe it's just a story they've told themselves, or they were not good at math in school, but like there's very little actual calculating or multiplying or any of that in the financial side. It's really just like looking at what is happening and course correcting, right? And that's just a skill that you use a lot as a business owner, period, right? What is happening? How do we adjust, right? You're always kind of moving. There's never a status quo for too long. And so it's a very transferable skill. And I think most therapists are very capable of learning and getting to that point as well. There's also plenty of doctors and dentists that are very, very, very bad with their money. So, yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I think there's an emotional component involved with everyone probably, but money's pretty emotional and it can be something to be avoided or revered and any number of things in between.
I think maybe also doctors and dentists perhaps get away with, people think they do better with it because they generally tend to make more money, right? That is a service that is more valued by health insurance companies, by, society. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but in general, right? A doctor can go out there and generate multiple millions of dollars per year in revenue, whereas one single therapist can typically not do that. So I think the doctors and the dentists of the world maybe can just out-earn their lack of knowledge sometimes. It doesn't show quite as keenly. Yeah.
Yeah. More money can hide money mistakes sometimes.
It absolutely can. You can outrun the bad financial decisions.
It's a good way to put it. Maybe we'll come back to that at some point. Yeah. This sounds good. So I do want to talk a little bit about profit first. I really don't see this interview as a profit first primer necessarily. I mean, your book is great for that. I've recommended it to 1 million people. And, there's the general profit first book, of course. So there's a lot out there on profit first. So I don't want to go super deep into it, but for anyone who may not have heard of it and have some, any idea what we're talking about here, I think it is probably important to lay a little bit of groundwork. So can you do just a high level overview of this profit first system and what it is?
Yeah. Well, so yes, profit first is the general premise that we are building in profit into your practice from the very beginning to make sure that there always is profit, right? And in the mental health industry specifically, there's a lot of guilt often around profit. They're like, oh, well, I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it to help people. And that's very kind and generous and noble. But in the real world, if you need money to live, which most of us do, right, to pay the bills and support yourself and your family and put food on the table and gas in the car and all the things that need to happen, making a profit is something that is necessary for a business to survive, right? There's not this mythical pot of money where you're going to just go grab extra cash because you're running your business poorly, right? There's a point where the business fails, it closes, it does not survive, and then it helps no one. So in order to help your clients, you have to have profit in the practice. So within Profit First, we turn the traditional accounting equation upside down. So instead of looking at income minus expenses equal profit, the Profit First equation is income minus profit equals expenses. We are building in profit, and that means you have less available to spend on expenses, but that means that you're always building in profit. And typically, what most business owners do in that case, when there's less available for expenses, you typically are going to get creative and naturally you will spend less because this is what I have available, right? It's just like when you're a kid, if your parents give you an allowance, that's what you have available to spend. So you have to figure out how to make that work. Or I don't know about you, Jeremy, but my parents, if I went to them and said hey, I already spent my $10, I need more, they would say that's a you problem. That is not we're not giving you more money. Were you in that same boat?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think I said that to my kids 3 days ago. Yeah.
Yeah. We're like, oh, that sounds like you need to go do some chores or do something else, right? Yeah. And really the business is the same, right? When there's no more money to spend, in the current economy, it's easy to go out there and get credit cards and loans and all that. But really when there's no money left in the business, it's the business telling you something is going on. Something is wrong that you need to fix. You can't just keep doing the same thing, borrowing money and hoping that it will magically get better. You do need to course correct. So in a nutshell, Profit First is a system that gives you buckets of or allocations of money to spend on various things in your business. So there are 5 of those things. So one is operating expenses. So your overhead, right? Your rent, your software, your liability insurance, the things that it takes to run your company. Then there is, your payroll. If you have a group practice, you will have payroll. It will likely be the single largest expense on your, on your P&L. So that is for your clinicians, for your admin, for your leadership. Then there is an owner's pay bucket. So how much do you pay? Do you save to pay yourself for the hard work that you do in the business? There's a tax bucket or allocation, and then there's a profit allocation as well. So we assign a specific percentage to each one of those things, depending on the size of the practice and on the specifics. But that means that it's really easy to know at a glance how much you have available for each thing, where is there opportunity, and where can you no longer spend anything. So that's the nutshell version of it.
Yeah. That was a great summary. I think a lot of people probably have some idea of Profit First and what it is, or they've read one or both of the books and get excited about it and then get overwhelmed by it. Yeah. But I'm sure you've heard this 10 times, 100 times more than I have, but it's, do I really have to open 5 bank accounts?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up often. Because a lot of business owners remember, like, the first time you go to the bank to open up your business bank account, it's a pain. Like, I will admit, it is a pain, right? And in part, that's because of banking regulations, right? Anti-money laundering. Like, they have to make sure that you are who you are and who you're supposed to be. But opening additional accounts is usually like a much, much, much smaller lift, right? It is usually a 10-minute visit or even a phone call instead of like a 90-minute situation. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to put that out there, because adding accounts is not as big of a deal. But Jeremy, there's something really powerful about seeing the money in the different bank accounts that doing Profit First kind of on paper or in a spreadsheet or in your head does not. When you're doing it on a spreadsheet, it's really easy to say, well, like, oh, this is not quite working, so I'm just going to like change this number over here. I'm like, oops, oh, look, now there's plenty of money for all the things, right? Where you're kind of borrowing, and I'm using air quotes here, borrowing from your tax account for something else. You're like, well, because you're not actually going through the pain of logging into your bank and transferring money from your tax account to your payroll account, because that doesn't feel good, right? It feels like, why am I having to do this? But that's the point. That is the system telling you something is up. Why are you having to use your tax money to make payroll? What is happening, right? And it won't fix the problem, right? Profit First won't fix the project magically, but it will tell you there's a problem and it's over here, right? Go look over here. This is the account that's giving you a problem. And so something has changed, good or bad, right? Sometimes it is like, hey, why is there no money coming into the practice? Like, is there a billing problem? Or did you hire more admin than you really can afford? Did you increase leadership at a rate that doesn't make sense? Is overhead increasing exponentially faster than your income, right? Like, something is up, and it will point you in the right direction so that you can, as the business owner, make the best decision for your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that I really love about it. And just, full transparency, we're not running Profit First to 100% fidelity. And this idea of knowing where the money should be going in general, I think is a lovely idea, and it can throw up those red flags because, like you said, there's information in the numbers. Yeah. And if you have a sense of where the money should be allocated and how much should be in each place, if it's not there, that's a real sign that something is going wrong. Yeah. Or going really well. Sometimes it goes in the other direction.
I mean, that's true. Like, yes, and I love those scenarios way, way better. And I also live in the real world, right? Because like I own an accounting firm and we work with hundreds of clients. And so we see the reality of like, sometimes you just have to take the tax money to run payroll. Like, sometimes that is the situation that you are in, but because it's not all commingled, you are so much more aware as the business owner that like something is up and we cannot keep going in this direction. And that in itself is really, really powerful. I was just working with a team on a new to us client who like took on a ton of debt in the last year. And we all collectively were like raising the flags, right? Of like, this is not a healthy situation. Like we have to be able to course correct this in a very short amount of time, or else there's a day very soon where there are no more loans to be had, right? Like there
Right.
is no one else who will loan you money. And if you haven't stopped the bleeding before that point, that could be the end of the business, right? And there's plenty of scenarios where we catch a practice early enough that we can help with that course correction. And there are some cases where it's just so far in that we can't move fast enough to do that. And I absolutely hope this is not that kind of situation, right? But there's a lot of changes that have to be made in a very short amount of time to get this back on track. And that's often a painful process for the owner, right? Because there's changes in the business. There's also usually changes personally that have to be made as well, right? Like there's often some personal spending that has ballooned or something else has been going on, right? Like the personal expenses have expanded faster than the profit of the business. And like it's not an easy scenario to be in, but Profit First can help. It cannot save a practice, but it can help like get back on the right track.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there's a lot of shame wrapped up in money, I think, and I'm sure you see that a lot. It's people being afraid to share things with you or, be totally transparent, and it's complicated. I have a lot of respect for the work that y'all are doing.
Well, listen, I could never do what you do. This is my my jam, but the numbers don't lie, right? Like once we look, we see what's going on, and these are not easy conversations to have, as I'm sure you can imagine. But there's a lot of power in just saying it out loud sometimes, like, hey, here's what we're seeing. Does that feel true to you? Right? Like, does it feel like we're explaining what you've been feeling, but not necessarily able to put into words? And that can be a relief to actually know and have someone on your side helping you out.
For sure. One of the things that I like about Profit First is that it is pretty clear about different stages of practice and what allocation of your revenue should be going to different places, like overhead or profit or owner's pay and taxes and so forth. One of the questions that people ask me that I don't totally know the answer to is, how do you arrive at those percentages? Like, how do we know that those are, accurate, quote unquote?
Oh, how are they?
For mental health practices.
Yeah. Or like, how do we know you're not full of it, Julie? Right? Like,
right.
Yeah. So we do a lot of research internally every single year, and have come up with these allocations based on many, many years of data. So when we work on this is not just what the top 5% of practice owners are doing or the bottom 5, right? We kind of exclude, like we look for statistically relevant practices, right? So we can't, if someone had a loss of $200,000, we cannot include them in here because it's going to skew the averages just so much more. Also, there's some practices out there that are just like insanely profitable, and that's amazing for them, but like that is not the average. So we exclude those as well. So we end up kind of in this middle of like, what are most people able to do realistically? Like, what is a realistic, reasonable expectation? And we arrive at averages. We look at the median and the mean, and then look at like, do kind of 90% of our middle fall in that range? And typically that is possible. That is the case. And so we actually have not changed the Profit First allocations since 2023 because they still continue to be relevant. Now, I do often get some pushback of like, oh, that's not possible. Like you can't possibly make that much money, right? Or like you can't have 20% profit margin if you make $5 million a year. And I would say if you were telling yourself that, then it's probably true for you, right? If those are the words that you were using for yourself, like that is, you're probably making that true for yourself. But we have these numbers because we know that they are possible. And we like, obviously we cannot share that. We can't share that data, but like for every size of practice, we have dozens of practices doing just that. And so we know that it's possible, and we know that adjustments are sometimes need to be made to arrive to that. And if you're willing to do that, you can do that too. And if you're not willing, well, you can choose to have a lower profit margin. That is a choice that you can make. But I'm going to advocate for profitable practices until the day I hang up my hat, because that is in service to everyone. So
I like your use of the word choice and choose. I think we get locked into things. We get locked into, I have to have this much admin support. I can only charge this much private pay, or I have to take insurance, or I have to pay for this EHR or whatever. And choice is a big part of this. There are a million choices that we can make along the way with how we're spending and making money in our practices. So I just want to highlight that and encourage folks to always keep the possibility of choice on the table.
It's so interesting to hear business owners feel like they are trapped, right? Like I have to give them a raise or they're going to leave, or like, but are they? Right. And sometimes that's true, but you, if you're building a business that does not rely on one specific person, including you, right, in the best case scenario, then it absolutely does suck to see someone leave, but it's really not the end of the world. And you have to make the decisions that are best for the business. And that's what the gig is, right? When you're the business owner, is sometimes you have to make a decision that's going to be not good for one specific person, but that is for the benefit of the whole team. And if you're kind of throwing off all of your ratios or paying someone a dollar amount that does not make financial sense for the practice, that is to the detriment of the entire business and everyone that it supports. And sometimes you have to make that hard call and say, like, actually, I feel like I can't, and I'm going to lose them, but I still can't. I can't do that.
Right. You're bringing up so many good points, and I am going to highlight two things that are maybe basic-ish, and then we can move on to like some more advanced kind of stuff. But one thing people always ask, what is my profit margin supposed to be? This is, it's become like a measuring stick, I think, for practices and a point of pride and so forth. So just for the record, can you share some information about a quote unquote typical profit margin for a testing practice? Testing, you work with a bunch of testing practices now. What should we expect for, a solo practice, maybe somebody with an employee or two and a little admin support? We can, take each of those.
Yeah. Well, so we actually, we look at testing practices on a regular basis as well. We don't have enough solo testing practices to have a recommendation. So it is not statistically significant. And so we cannot, I cannot make a pronunciation. When it comes to general mental health, what we typically see as a solo practice is around 30 to 50% of income, right? So that should be around your take home pay. It can absolutely go higher than that, but that's kind of where we see most regularly, or right around 50%. When it comes to a small group with like maybe one clinician, an admin, something along those lines, that is usually closer to 30%. It just keeps going down, just because you do tend to have, you have to pay other people, right? And so that's going to change. And in a small group, the owner's still doing a significant amount of the work as well, right? And so 30-ish percent is what we will often see. It's not possible really to have a group where there's like one or two part-time clinicians and the owner's not seeing clients. Like, that's not a thing. There's not enough revenue coming into the practice to support that. Then as we grow towards like $1 million+ practice, we usually see, specifically in testing, 20 to 25% profit margin. And in that, I'm including owner's pay and profit margin, right? So not necessarily from a profit first standpoint, but I'm looking at like the total kind of taxable income that the owner reports. So if they have an S corporation, for example, that will be their owner's wages, and benefits that directly benefit them, plus the profit margin. If they had a single member LLC or PLLC, that would be just the profit on the profit and loss, right? So however you like, whatever mechanism or vehicle you use to take that money home, like, I'm combining all of those to compare apples to apples. But yeah, 20 to 25% is typically what we see. Whereas for like traditional mental health practices, we actually see a number that's lower than that. So there is the opportunity for more profit in a testing practice, which came as a surprise to me, honestly.
It is surprising because the overhead is higher, I would think, right?
Yes.
Because we have to buy materials, whereas therapists don't buy materials.
Correct.
Do you have any hypotheses about why that number is higher, the profit's higher, even with the higher overhead?
Yeah, the overhead is higher. However, we typically see clinical payroll be lower, that in general. And in part because of the way the service is rendered, where there's theoretically more technician hours than like direct one-on-one from a master's level therapist. So because of that mix, clinical payroll tends to be lower.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So if there's anybody out there listening, thinking about taking on a psychometrist, it is more financially viable.
It is. Well, but okay, I guess I have to turn the table on you a little bit. Have you found that to be accurate in your practice?
Oh, well, sure. Yeah. I mean, we compensate psychometrists less than licensed clinicians, certainly. So yeah, from a financial standpoint, psychometrists are a great choice for a testing practice. There's some debate about the clinical accuracy, but that's a debate that we don't have to get into.
Yeah. So people. I am not completely unfair for that piece of it. But so we generally see testing practices have clinical payroll that's around almost 10% less than a traditional like mental health practice. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's where the difference is. Like, yes, you are higher in overhead, but you compensate for that in the reduced payroll.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I wonder, I could be totally missing this, but I wonder too if there's something around like the private pay rates for testing can typically go higher than for therapy, and then payroll as a percentage of income might be relatively lower because the income's higher, the fees are higher, so you can maybe pay people a little bit more, and it's still not as much of payroll. If that's a
really great point. I always find that it's just a little bit harder to track directly, right, for testing practices, because it's usually like, we're going to do all of these things, and the way they get like if there is insurance involved, the way they get submitted to insurance, like it's just a little bit less obvious. It always feels like it's not just, okay, this hour was for this code, right? It's like multiple codes all the time. It's just a little bit harder to trace.
Yeah, I hear you. So the other thing I was going to ask you about that we were kind of touching on is, I know there are people out there who are listening and they're like kind of on the edge of their seat about like, am I doing okay? So I want to ask, like, are there any, I guess, core red flags that people need to be aware of? Like if they're looking at their numbers, or if they're even looking at their bank accounts or whatever, in running their practice, like money issues that you can identify, like, hey, if this is happening, you should probably take some action and do something different.
Probably talk to someone. Okay, couple of things. Yeah. First of all, if you are hit with NSF fees, non-sufficient fund fees on a somewhat regular basis, something is up, right? Like you're spending more than you make. If you have negative profit on a regular basis, but sometimes you don't even get to that point because you're just not looking, right? And so the NSF fee is kind of a better canary in the coal mine of like, okay, there's not enough money in this bank account, especially if there's just the one bank account, that tells you something, right? Something is up. And it's not always what you think. Sometimes the thing that is up is you're spending way more personally than you thought you were. Like you were taking so much out of the business that you are putting it at risk. I've seen that happen plenty of times. Sometimes it is, it could be so many things. It could be fraud. It could be a team member that's getting paid for way more hours than you expected that they were, right? An administrative team member. Like it can be just so many different things. It could be, Blue Cross has stopped paying you, or United, but you just haven't noticed yet. It could be your biller disappeared. It could be a million and one different things, but if cash flow is really tough, you probably need to take a really close look at what is going on. If you have a hard time paying for taxes, paying either your tax due with your return in April or your quarterly estimated taxes, is also a sign that something is up. Because if you are looking at the financials, if you're saving on a regular basis for taxes, you should be in the ballpark, right? Like plus or minus a little bit, but you should be like, it should not be a surprise. It should not be an unexpected thing, because taxes are never unexpected. Like, we know they're coming. We know it's going to happen. And so that probably just means you're not looking closely enough. And I say that with absolutely no judgment, but tax issues, like 1 year of a really big unexpected tax payment or tax bill can set you back for literally years. It can take years to catch up from that. So the more proactively you can take a look at that, the better off your practice will be. And then you're not, accidentally spending your tax money. And I'm using air quotes again, even though some of you might not be able to see it. But right, sometimes it can feel like there's money in the business that you can take out, but what you're actually taking out is tax money because you just haven't been thinking about it or planning ahead for it. It was never your money to start with, but it's already gone. And so what do you do? What do you do now? Those are two big items. If you're stressed out every time you run payroll because you're not sure if the checks are going to clear, something is going on also, right? It's time to take a cold, hard look at what is happening. If you find yourself writing manual checks because it's going to give you a couple of extra days, that's not good, right? And so again, without any judgment, like those are just signs. Those are flags that your business is waving, saying like, help me, I need something else from you at this point in time. So those are all kind of some signs that I can think of.
Great. That sounds good. And maybe we wrap this basic intro section just with, folks are hearing some of these things and they're like, I want to take some step to be better about this. Is there like an easy sort of intro to Profit First or a way to get started?
Yeah. Reading the book is a very, very accessible way, to get started. Just hear more about it. There's a, paperback, audio, and an ebook as well. So those are some items. I do think it's better to read the book or have some kind of knowledge before starting so that you actually like set it up correctly. But I am very much okay. And I say this in the book, like if you feel overwhelmed by the whole thing, start with a profit account and a tax account, right? Like just add those two. Maybe you don't go all in. No judgment, but just those two things, having a little bit of money in a profit account that serves as a reward and an emergency fund for your business, and starting to put some money in tax, right? It's not going to maybe cover your whole tax bill, but something is always better than nothing. And so like that's a good way to gently like ease your way into it.
Great. That's very doable. Very doable.
Easy enough, right?
It's so easy.
Totally doable.
So I do want to flip the script a little bit. And This is a big part of reaching out to you, is that I think there's a lot of basics out there in books, like I said, but I would love to talk about what happens next. Like, what if it's actually going well? What are some more kind of advanced strategies for, folks out there who feel like they have a pretty good handle on the basics? So maybe we just start there with a general kind of open question, which is like, let's say somebody's running Profit First or just has a good handle on their finances. They are pretty consistently hitting that 20% profit margin. What happens next in terms of like optimizing cash flow or like advanced fun things you could do with the money in your practice?
Let's take a break to hear from a featured partner. Y'all know that I love therapy notes, but I am not the only one. They have a 4.9 out of 5-star rating on trustpilot.com and Google, which makes them the #1 rated electronic health record system available for mental health folks today. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, and telehealth all incredibly easy. They also offer custom forms that you can send through the portal. For all the prescribers out there, Therapy Notes is proudly offering e-prescribe as well. And maybe the most important thing for me is that they have live telephone support 7 days a week, so you can actually talk to a real person in a timely manner. If you're trying to switch from another EHR, the transition is incredibly easy. They'll import your demographic data free of charge, so you can get going right away. So if you're curious, or you want to switch, or you need a new EHR, try Therapy Notes for 2 months, absolutely free. You can go to thetestingpsychologist.com/therapy notes and enter the code TESTING. Again, totally free, no strings attached. Check it out and see why everyone is switching to Therapy Notes. The Spectra Indices of Psychopathology provides a hierarchical dimensional look at adult psychopathology. Decades of research into psychiatric disorders have shown that most diagnoses can be integrated into a few broad dimensions. The Spectra measures 12 clinically important constructs of depression, anxiety, social anxiety, PTSD, alcohol problems, severe aggression, antisocial behavior, drug problems, psychosis, paranoid ideation, manic activation, and grandiose ideation. That's a lot. It organizes them into 3 higher order psychopathology spectra of internalizing, externalizing, and reality impairing. The Spectra is available for paper and pencil assessment or administration and scoring via PARI Connect. You can learn more at parinc.com/spectra. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
I love that. Okay, there's a couple of different options, and I kind of want to just blurt them all out.
Yeah.
So there is like expansion, there is living your best life, and really replacing yourself, or kind of the 3 top things. So one is like things are going really well. Okay, do we want to do more of this, right? And there's no right or wrong answer in my mind. It's just, what do you personally want? It could depend on your age, on your family situation, on just where you are in your life. Like, are you loving the business in this stage? Do you want to just keep doing this? In which case you could add, for example, an expansion bank account where money's like, you don't really need to take home more money. So you just start stockpiling money over there in this expansion account. And we have several clients who do this. And when they get to a specific amount, then they start looking for a new location. For some, that's 50,000. For some, it's 100,000. Like, okay, there's 100,000 in this account. Let me go look at, where are we going next? Is there a new city, another city close by that we want to expand into and open up a new office there? Sometimes it can be like a building, right? I generally, there's a lot of practice owners that also own the real estate. I think you have to be in a really strong personal financial position for that to make sense. Just because you don't want to contort your practice to fit the real estate. And that often happens when you own the building, right? I think you should just go to whatever location is going to be best for your, for your business, versus the other way around, right? Like restricting the business to fit in the real estate that you already own. But that can be like, if you're in a good financial position, you've got the 20 or 30% down that a commercial real estate deal is going to require. You're doing retirement savings, you're doing other things already. Like, this is another great way to just diversify your portfolio. Go for it, do it. But sometimes that could be a different kind of real estate deal, right? That's not commercial. Like, maybe you want to buy residential real estate or a second home or whatever that may, a home that you're going to Airbnb. Cool. Go ahead and do that, right? Save money, to do that. There are other cases where like things are going so well, you decide, maybe I love this business and it's going well, and I'm willing to take a little bit less money home. I'm going to replace myself in this business, and I'm going to take a more passive role because I have this other cool project that I want to go work on over here, or I just want to like golf, or I don't know, play pickleball or whatever that may be. And again, like, I just don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just based on, what do you want to do with your life? All of those are options when you have a cash flow positive business, which is a great place to be. Yeah. which one of those resonates with you? I'm curious, like which one would you pick out of those scenarios?
They all sound appealing. Oh gosh, that's a tough question. You're not allowed to ask questions, Julie. I'm the one that asks the questions.
I know this. I like to turn the mic around for a second.
Yeah. It's a good one. I think the place that I'm at right now, I would honestly buy back time. So I would, maybe that's replace myself. Maybe that is just not doing any more clinical work. I don't do a ton, but just, gaining 5 or 8 hours a week would be helpful. I might kind of funnel some to my personal life to hire I'm just being direct, like maybe a chef or like an executive assistant or something.
Yeah.
Biggest precious commodity right now is time. And so anything I could do to like buy time would be amazing.
Yeah. So you are not in the golf and pickleball place, but like, buy back time for just yourself maybe.
Yeah. And then maybe I would play pickleball.
Oh, there you go.
Golf.
Yeah.
But
play some.
Yeah. Buying back time would be amazing.
Yeah. And that's often not as expensive as people think it will be, right? Where like sometimes it's just a time audit. What are you spending your time on? And like, could you hire an assistant that can do like 5 hours a week of that stuff that you no longer have to do? Or, and sometimes it's a much deeper, like hiring of a clinical director who's really stepping into your leadership shoes as the owner, whether you're seeing clients or not, right? And just really replacing you where you are acting more as an advisor to them. And they are really leading your company and you're maybe in it a couple hours a week. Like we have multiple clients who are now in that situation, as well, where it's almost like a semi-retired, position. And there's a lot in between those two things as well. Right. Yeah. I'm in the stage of life where my kids are all in school and I'm realizing just how quickly they will be out of the house. Like I just have a handful of precious years. And so I'm in the same boat as you where like, I want to be around and work a little bit less and, have dinner with my family every night and travel a little bit less and all of that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're in a similar place. I think our kids are similar ages.
Our kids are almost the same age. Yeah. So my oldest will be a high schooler next year, which feels like the clock is ticking, right? Like, oh, that's
absolutely
4 years will go so fast. Yeah.
It really will. Yeah. We sat down, my wife and I probably 2 months ago and, just mapped it out and mapped out all the school breaks between spring break and summer. We get a Thanksgiving break and we figured out we essentially have like 15, maybe 18 opportunities to take a trip with our kids before they move out. And, that hits home. So I'm in the same boat. That really drives a lot.
Yeah. Wow, 15. That just like hit me right in the heart.
Oh my gosh. I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay.
Turn this into an existential dilemma. But,
got to make the most of that
big
time.
Motivation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. So I love those options. Again, it gives people choice if things are going really well. I want to maybe detour a little bit into the expansion question because I feel like that is where a lot of people sort of default to. If things are going well in a solo practice and the money is pretty good, then a natural question is, okay, do I have a group practice? Do I hire someone? Do I go that direction? What have you seen? What have you seen people mess up essentially, like in that transition to a group, especially from a financial standpoint? Are there any things that jump out when you see people start to hire and expand?
Yeah, a lot. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard, I want to start a group practice because I want passive income, I would have a lot of nickels. And there is nothing passive about a group practice. There's nothing. It is so much work. It is absolutely worth it. And you can make money, but it is 0% passive. There is so much work to get done before that point of passive revenue, right? Like typically you, to be able to step away from your practice, you will typically need to be making at least $3 million a year, if not more. The practice generating that kind of revenue before that, you really just cannot afford all the pieces and all the bodies to replace the work that you do, right? Like you will not have enough systems that you can truly step out, and definitely not enough redundancy, not enough overlap, right? Like you can maybe step out temporarily for a few weeks, but if your biller quits, like there's one biller, and so guess what? You're back in that seat, right? And so it's not long term. You're not long term out. So to have enough kind of seats at the table to be able to truly step away, it takes a pretty large group practice. So the passive piece, though, is kind of number one, like expecting that you're just going to hire someone and then magically you're going to make a lot more money. Practice owners also underestimate how many clients they are going to need to see when they hire someone. Like if you're seeing a full caseload and you hire one part-time clinician, guess what? You still have a full caseload. Like you can afford to reduce by 0 clients. There is no room. And I often get that question from, small groups where they have like 2 part-time clinicians. Like, hey, can I stop seeing clients? Absolutely not. There is not, the math doesn't math. You can't, right? And I know it's hard though, because that's kind of the hardest, like that small group practice where you're just kind of getting your sea legs and figuring out your processes and procedures and your handbook and your policies. Like that is by far the hardest part. And it is the least rewarding, right? You are working so hard, you're wearing so hats, and you are making marginally more money, if any. There are plenty of cases too where you're making less money than before. And so we often see at that inflection point, like that a decision needs to be made. Either you're going to stick with this and keep growing where you have enough sessions, enough revenue to be able to afford a biller, an intake, right? Like additional services, or you have to make the decision that this is not for you and go back to solo and manage everything yourself. I remember I had a group practice client years ago who had like 12 clinicians and was still herself doing all of the intake, literally from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for 12 clinicians. Like never 7 days a week also.
Oh my gosh.
Like that was probably too long, right? She did that way too long. And one of the first thing we told her is like, please hire an intake court. Like you can afford it. Please go ahead. Like if you made $50,000 less next year, would that be okay with you to get your life back? And yes, that is absolutely what she wanted. But that in between part, like you are as the owner filling all of those seats out of necessity because there is not enough just money to add a lot of things. And so I think it absolutely can be worthwhile, but you have to go in with a clear head and clear expectations. And if you're not willing to put in the work to get to the other side of that, then maybe it's not for you, or maybe now is not the right time for you. And all of those things are completely okay. But if you know what you're getting into, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying all that. The 3 million number is interesting. I've never heard that kind of threshold as far as what you would actually need to step away. I don't know how I came up with this, but a few years ago, I had it pegged at like 7x your individual income would allow you to have some kind of passive. I don't know. It's not as precise, but it's but that kind of makes sense actually. I mean, 3 million is maybe a solo income of 300 to 400. I mean, which kind of maths. But yeah. I mean, I think that's good to know.
That's not a perfect science number either. But it's more of like, what are the, is there a clinical director in place? Like at the 3 million mark, there probably is, right? You probably have, if you have multiple locations, a site supervisor for each site because you're not there as the owner every day. And that site supervisor is seeing clients, right? But they're not seeing a full client load. Do you probably have at 3 million, like 1 to 2 intake, 1 to 2 billers, right? Like you kind of have those redundancies in place so that even if someone's on vacation, like you're not the one being tapped on the shoulder, to cover those pieces, right? There's multiple layers at that point. There's good systems in place. It's hard to grow to $3 million a year without, so, you have systems around hiring and recruiting and like the things are working like clockwork in many ways. It's never perfect. Things are going to break, but there's generally a way to do things that other people know.
Right. Yeah, it's good. Systems are so valuable. So
Yes.
valuable.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So speaking of the group, last question I'll ask about expanding into a group is the compensation. People, the 60% number is floating around everywhere. It's
Yeah.
like, we need to pay our clinicians 60% of revenue. And I would love to get your perspective on the range of compensation. We'll stick to W-2 for now, just to keep it simple, but the range of compensation that can be reasonable.
My recommendation is for a fully licensed clinician that they should be paid somewhere between 45 to 60% of the revenue they generate. 45 to 60 includes wages, payroll tax, and benefits. So that doesn't mean a base wage of 60%, because that's going to cost you really closer to 70, 72% all in, right? With payroll tax and benefits. And so, that means it has to be lower than 60%. And I'm sticking to it. That's my line in the sand. I get a lot of pushback on that. And my response to that is generally, you're the business owner. Like, I'm going to make my recommendation. You can do whatever you want. That doesn't change my recommendation, right? If you decide you want to go higher than that, that's great. You will have decisions to make. As far as where are you going to go lower? If it's nowhere else, then that means your profit is going to be low. And that's a choice you're allowed to make, but not one that I'm going to recommend. Yeah.
Very reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to double click on that. 60% is the top of the range for you.
Yeah.
Inclusive of benefits and
including
taxes,
benefits.
payroll
Yes.
taxes. Yeah.
And so that also means, though, you can't, like, if you make the offer when you're hiring someone at the very top of that range, guess what? There's nowhere to go. Because that is kind of all in, right? Unless you're able to increase your rates, or pay them with some other like magic money that's coming from somewhere else. Like, at some point that is going to cut into your profit margin. It just is. And so 20% turns into 14 and then 11 and then 7. And then like, oops, we're not making any money anymore. And so there is unfortunately a cap, right? And I do wish things were different. I wish reimbursements were higher. I wish mental health was valued more, right? I do wish for all of those things. And yet the reality is that the math has to make sense. And if you're going to hire someone and pay them more than they generate for your practice, you might as well not hire someone. You would be better off financially to not hire them, because you or someone else in the practice is going to have to work harder to compensate for that. There are plenty of situations where a clinician is making more money than they generate, and that doesn't make sense. There is an end to that, because at some point you can't sustain that long term.
Yeah. What are some of those situations? I can maybe see it with a leadership position or someone who's not seeing as many clients. When are you seeing people being paid more than they're generating?
Yeah, I have seen, I'm going to detour a little bit. In a leadership position, those are typically going to be break-even positions, right? So like that site supervisor, I'm usually looking for them to at least bring in enough revenue to cover their wages, payroll tax, and benefits, right? That means you have to have enough other people on the team to contribute to overhead, admin, right? Like all the other expenses to the business. But usually for a leadership position, if they can at least break even, we're usually in pretty good shape, as long as the rest of the practice is healthy. But I have seen, I've been doing this for a long time at this point. I've seen 85% splits, which is 85%. If you add payroll tax and benefits to that, you're right up against 100%. But I've seen the highest split I've seen is 100%, where they were getting 100% of the revenue they generated. They were doing a couple of additional duties in the business, but like plus payroll tax and benefits. So that's just digging a hole that gets deeper and deeper and deeper. These are few and far between, but it does happen. it also can happen if you're paying for admin time. So if you are paying a clinician for the work that they do, right? Let's say you're paying 60% base and they're seeing 3 clients a week and you're paying them for 8 admin hours. Like, guess what? There's very little like profit margin that there was in that is gone.
Yeah, that brings back memories. That was one of my biggest mistakes when we had therapists on our staff, was paying for admin time. Not to that, but paying for admin time was a big income suck.
Yeah. If someone is like pulling their weight, right? Seeing 20 clients, 3 admin hours, like that's probably not as big of a deal. But especially with those very part-time clinicians, there's so little margin already in someone who's very part-time. And then you add that on top of it, like you'd be better off just not having the mental load of having that person on your team.
Sure. Yeah. These are, I think there's a lot of nuggets in this conversation and almost like throwaway lines, but they're important. Something like that, just that willingness again to make the choice. You don't have to have that person on your team. Like there is a point where an employee becomes profitable for the business, and when they're not profitable, and sometimes we overlook that. I have to bring this person on, or I have to keep this person even though they want to reduce their hours or whatever it may be. That's not always the case.
Yeah. If we have time, I generally find that 10 sessions per week is usually the break even for most practices. Okay. Where if you have a clinician who's seeing 4, 5, 6 sessions per week, by the time you cover, just all those software expenses that don't change whether someone's seeing 1 or 18 clients per week, right? Your EHR, your phone, like all the things, and then your support systems as well. Below that, like they're not even contributing to your overhead at that point. And so what I also find though, is that the mental load of managing someone who is seeing 5 clients a week and 20 clients a week is very similar, if not almost more, for the 5-hour a week person, right? Because if the owner, especially if they're in that intake seat as well, if you're always wondering like, well, can I schedule them? Are they here that day? Can we make this work? It's more work than someone who you just know is going to be there. Like you have their schedule. They're always available. Like whatever it says in the EHR is accurate. And so I think the mental load is often not considered enough in like, if someone's not contributing to the bottom line, not really around, and it's taking you a lot of mental energy. Like, why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this? Yeah, that makes me think about just being deliberate in this whole process. And I have run into, don't get me wrong, I made a lot of decisions that were not as deliberate or thoughtful as they could have been. And I think a lot of us, especially with hiring, it's almost reactive, and a lot of it happens without being deliberate and considering everything that entails.
I have made these mistakes too, right? Like I am tough with numbers, but I'm also human. And sometimes you have someone on your team that you really like and like, oh, I just want to keep making it work. And it just doesn't work. Sometimes it just doesn't work anymore. And it's a sad and tough decision to make, but sometimes you're just better off for it. Yeah.
It's true. So let me see. I may ask you 1 or 2 more questions and then we can wrap up. This has been great. You talked about debt a lot in the beginning and how that can be a bad thing, right? I mean, typically people are sort of over leveraged and borrowing to cover. Is there any situation that you have seen where taking on debt can be helpful?
Sure. I'm not anti-debt. I am just, because of my story of origin, I am just financially cautious is how I would call it, right? Like my mom kind of went into these business ideas with abandon and not really with a consideration of like, how are we going to pay for any of this? Like how is this all going to work? And so I just tend to be a little bit more cautious because of that. And really when you're taking on debt, you are spending tomorrow's money today, right? That is ultimately what we are doing. And so it is possible for that to make sense. There are lots of folks who have started businesses by taking maybe a small like $10,000 SBA loan, right? To like, just to get them kind of over the hump and like get the systems in place and have the time and space to get everything lined up to start. But when you are doing that, I think you have to have a clear path to return on investment with that money, right? It can't just be, well, let me take on this loan and maybe I'm going to pay myself with it and maybe I'm going to do this with it, right? Like you have to have a good plan and you should be spending that money on things that are going to make you money. Not so like we're not taking out a loan to go buy throw cushions for our room. Like that's not going to make you money, right? What is going to make us money? A strong website where people are able to find you easily, right? With good SEO, that's going to make it very clear who your ideal client is, right? Like that's a good investment that will make you money. But having that clear vision, can be really helpful. And we'll suggest kind of a in-between step. I am generally a fan, like if someone is borrowing to start a business, I would love to see them save up first, save up money, and then have some money saved up for themselves, and then supplement that with a loan versus just a loan. Because the ability to save up money means like, okay, you have carved out part of your budget already, and we know that you have this money available for the business, right? Because when you borrow money, at some point in the short future, you have to start making payments on that. And so if there's not even a plan for like, how are we going to make these loan payments? You can end up in a more difficult financial situation after the loan than before the loan. But if you're able to start saving money, right, and have maybe $5,000 saved, and then you take on a loan for some of it. So you're spending some of your own money, which feels different always when you're spending your own cash, and you have the loan. So you not only have a smaller payment, but you're able to save that. You were able to save that money. So you can take that same amount and work that towards the loan payment. So that's my more like cautious in between recommendation. Also for expansion, I feel the same way when it comes to expanding the business. Like if there's $0 available for you to save for expansion, you probably shouldn't also take out a loan to expand, because in a time of expansion, usually there's a 6 to 12 month period where you are actually going to make less than before. And so if there's today no money to even save a little bit, what makes you think during this expansion, somehow that money's going to appear? It usually doesn't.
Right. It's like having a baby to save a marriage.
Yeah.
Maybe that's too intense, but
I mean, babies are intense, and babies are so expensive too. I was thinking about it. Like, let's have him.
Yeah.
Babies make
stuff,
everything
Julie.
harder.
Babies do make everything harder. Yeah. Have you heard that Jim Gaffigan joke? We love Jim Gaffigan in our house, but he's a comedian, and he has this joke that says, what's it like to have 5 kids? And he said, well, it's like you're drowning and then someone tosses you a baby. And that just resonates so much.
I think I've read that he lives in New York City in a small little apartment with his 5 kids, right?
Yeah.
It's like something like a very challenging sounding situation. Yeah.
It's a whole story. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you decide to have another baby, and someone throws you another baby. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Everything's fine.
Yes. So anyway, if you're going to expand, have some money saved. This is great. I'm going to close with a personal question, maybe, that hopefully will wrap this up. And I am curious. So I know that for me, the way that I've approached money in my practice and in my life has changed pretty significantly, I think, over time. So I'm curious for you, being in this field, doing the work that you do, seeing all these practices, diving into the numbers, how has your own financial perspective changed over the years? And anything that you have learned along the way as a business owner yourself?
Yeah, I would say I'm less debt averse today than I was 10 years ago. In the sense that, like, I think more practice owners should have a line of credit and should get it when things are going really well, right? We tend to, like, when things are going well, we're thinking, everything's always going to be fine. In business, what I've learned is that it's not a question of if something will go wrong. It's really a question of when. At some point, something will go wrong. And I just go into every day expecting, just knowing that, right? At some point, something's going to go wrong this year. And so preparing yourself when things are going really well can serve you when things are not going so well. So I have a line of credit for my business, which I did not have 10 years ago. And I always prefer not to use it, but I really like knowing that it's there just in case.
Same here.
Yeah. And I also, it's always very interesting to see the financials and then make those kind of micro decisions behind the scenes of oh, I don't want to do things that way. Or, oh, maybe I should try, maybe I could be a little bit more aggressive because this has worked really well in this situation. Right. So I think I've just evolved over time, just like I have evolved, hopefully, as a parent, as a mom, and as a leader of the practice. I hope that I'm doing things, in the right way, and that the right way might change over time. But at least I know that I'm doing it in a way that feels true to me and to who I am. And I try to do things in a way that help me sleep well at night, and I sleep really well. So I feel like if I know my team is okay and everyone is protected and my family is going to be okay, then I can sleep well.
I like that gauge. Yes.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. And that includes life insurance and, just all of the things that go with that, emergency funds and the business, the line of credit, all of those things kind of help pad everything. So that's my perspective on it.
I appreciate you sharing that. Well, this has been a great conversation, as expected. How can people find you if they want to talk to you or work with you or any of those things?
Yes, I also have a podcast called Therapy for Your Money. So I would love for you to find that. I talk about all financial topics specifically for mental health, Therapy for Your Money. And my firm is Green Oak Accounting. So feel free to check us out, greenoakaccounting.com. You can just lurk and see all the fun. We have a lot of fun resources available there on the blog, but you can also schedule a free consultation with the team and see if our services might be a good fit for you. And you can also find my book, Profit First for Therapists, on Amazon or wherever books are sold.
Fantastic. Thanks again. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Always grateful to have you here. I hope that you take away some information that you can implement in your practice and in your life. Any resources that we mentioned during the episode will be listed in the show notes, so make sure to check those out. If you like what you hear on the podcast, I would be so grateful if you left a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're a practice owner or aspiring practice owner, I'd invite you to check out the Testing Psychologist mastermind groups. I have mastermind groups at every stage of practice development, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. We have homework, we have accountability, we have support, we have resources. These groups are amazing. We do a lot of work and a lot of connecting. If that sounds interesting to you, you can check out the details at thetestingpsychologist.com/consulting. You can sign up for a pre-group phone call and we will chat and figure out if a group could be a good fit for you. Thanks so much. The information contained in this podcast and on the Testing Psychologist website are intended for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing in this podcast or on the website is intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please note that no doctor-patient relationship is formed here, and similarly, no supervisory or consultative relationship is formed between the host or guests of this podcast and listeners of this podcast. If you need the qualified advice of any mental health practitioner or medical provider, please seek one in your area. Similarly, if you Need supervision on clinical matters? Please find a supervisor with an expertise that fits your needs.